Okay, we're going to talk about the glands, the endocrine glands, and what they are. So we'll start with the hypothalamus. Because the hypothalamus is basically, in control of like the autonomic nervous system. It is responsible for body homeostasis, and it also basically controls the endocrine system. So the hypothalamus, if you remember, is part of the brain. It looks kind of like that. It's in the bottom, or it's like, inferior and a little anterior part of the diencephalon. So you have the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. So the thalamus is up here. And then we have our hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus, again, controls and communicates with the next gland, which is the pituitary. And the pituitary has two parts to it. It has the anterior pituitary, and it has the posterior pituitary. And each one functions a little bit differently. The anterior pituitary is glandular tissue, and the posterior pituitary is neural tissue. And the anterior pituitary makes its own hormones that are secreted to stimulate other glands or have different effects on the body. They are released through what we call releasing hormones that are secreted from the hypothalamus. So the link here between hypothalamus and anterior pituitary is through the blood. So there's capillaries in here, and these capillaries are connected. That's called a portal system. So we'll talk more about that within the chapter. The posterior pituitary does not make any hormones. The hormones are actually made in nuclei in the hypothalamus, and then those neurons basically send those hormones down through their axons, and then they are stored here in the posterior pituitary, where when it's time for them to be released, then the hypothalamus will signal posterior pituitary to secrete those into the blood. Yeah. The next gland is the pineal gland. And the pineal gland, we talked about a little bit last semester. It's part of the epithalamus, so it's in the back or the posterior part of the epithalamus, or of the diencephalon. And basically it secretes melatonin, which makes us sleep. Melatonin. The next one is the thyroid gland. And the thyroid gland is a gland that's in the neck. It looks a little bit like this, and it kind of wraps around the spinal column there. And basically it has an effect on metabolism, blood pressure, all kinds of things. And the hormones that it secretes are called T3 and T4, or thyroxine and T3, and those are stimulated to be secreted through what's called TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone that comes from the pituitary gland. On the back of the thyroid gland are the parathyroids. And we talked about those last semester, so not really going to talk too much about them here, but parathyroid glands are located on the back of the thyroid gland, on little nodules here, and they monitor for blood calcium levels being low. And then when they're low, they secrete PTH, which is parathyroid hormone. Put T3 and T4, that's what's here. Parathyroid hormone then targets the bones, targets the digestive tract, basically, tells the body to absorb more calcium, targets the kidneys so it doesn't, it retains the calcium, doesn't let it go out in the urine, and of course targets the bone. All right, the next gland is the adrenal glands. So adrenal glands are little glands that are located on top of the kidneys. So if that's the kidney, looks like a bean, it's located on top there. So we look closer to it. It has two main parts. So it has a center part, which is called the medulla. It's neural tissue, and this is the part that connects with the sympathetic nervous system, allowing epinephrine to be dumped into the blood to provide sympathetic activity. And the outside here of the medulla has 3 layers, and this is called the cortex. And the cortex secretes what we call mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, and androgens. And we'll talk about all that when we get into the adrenal glands. The next one is the pancreas. So the pancreas is both endocrine and exocrine. So it has a small area in it that is endocrine. It's called the islets of Langerhans. So these islets contain cells, so alpha cells, that secrete glucagon, and beta cells that secrete insulin. So glucagon is a hormone that takes blood out of storage areas or takes glucose out of storage areas and puts it in the blood. Insulin is basically glucose in the blood. Insulin tells the cells to take it in, so it gets glucose out of the blood. The rest of the pancreas is exocrine. It makes enzymes and things like that. The next one is going to be the kidney. So these are going to be, the next things I'm going to talk about are basically organs. They're not necessarily prominently glands, but they do secrete important hormones. So the kidney secretes, or does a couple of things endocrine wise, but probably the most important that it does is it secretes something called erythropoietin. Erythropoietin. I'm not sure if that's spelled right. Anyway, so with erythropoietin stimulates or targets the bone marrow, and it increases blood cell production. The next one is the ovaries and testes, and these are for reproduction, obviously, but the ovaries secrete estrogen and progesterone, and the testes secrete testosterone. And lastly, we have the stomach. And the stomach secretes gastrin. So gastrin is a hormone that targets the stomach and increases motility to increase digestion and absorption and that kind of thing. So it has an effect on digestion and absorption of food. So that's most of what we're going to talk about with the endocrine system, starting, of course, with the hypothalamus and pituitary glands. And then there are a couple of other minor things, glands or organs as well. So just keep in mind these are how these look, and be able to identify those. You're going to see those in the lab and all of that as well. So now we're going to start talking specifically about how the endocrine system works.